The first error that deeply wounds Our Lady's heart was revealed by Padre Pio during a private confession in 1957. A woman came to him with what she thought were minor sins, but Padre Pio immediately said, "You've been decorating your home with flowers all May while your soul remains unattended." The woman was shocked. How could he know? This error is one many of us commit daily without realizing how it pains the Mother of God. But this is just the beginning of what Padre Pio revealed about offending Mary during her special month. What he shared next would change everything. The second error that offends the Virgin Mary deeply during May is something Padre Pio noticed spreading like wildfire among the faithful, performing May devotions mechanically without heart. In the letter to his spiritual daughter, Rafaelina Terras, dated May 15th, 1914, Padre Pio wrote about witnessing souls who recited the rosary daily throughout the month, but approached it as a burden rather than an act of love. They count the beads with their fingers, he revealed, but their hearts count the minutes until it's over. This mechanical devotion pains Mary more than outright neglect, because it represents a soul that approaches her as an obligation rather than a relationship. Padre Pio explained that Mary would rather have one Hail Mary prayed with complete attention and love than an entire rosary rushed through while thinking about dinner preparations or work troubles. During one confession, a man proudly told Padre Pio he had never missed a day of the rosary in 15 years. Instead of praise, the saint looked deeply troubled. "My son," he said gently, "you have never actually prayed the rosary. You have merely said it." The man left in tears, finally understanding the difference. Padre Pio provided a simple test. Can you recall what you meditated on during each mystery? If not, you've likely fallen into this second error. The remedy is surprisingly simple, yet profoundly effective. Before beginning any May devotion, Padre Pio advised spending just 30 seconds in silence, visualizing Mary standing before you with her immaculate heart visible. See how it beats with love for you personally. Then begin your prayer as a conversation with this loving presence rather than words to be completed. Those who implemented this 30-second preparation reported extraordinary changes in their spiritual lives. One woman in San Giovanni Rotondo wrote that after practicing this for just 1 week in May, she experienced Mary's presence so vividly during prayer that she wept with joy. But Padre Pio warned that these first two errors, while serious, pale in comparison to the third error he witnessed causing the greatest pain to Our Lady's heart. This third error is so subtle that even devout Catholics committed it regularly during May without realizing the spiritual damage it caused. The other errors wound her heart, Padre Pio confided to a fellow friar, but this third one actually delays souls from reaching heaven. It's an error I've seen in nearly every household that claims devotion to the Mother of God. If you've recognized yourself in either of the first two errors, leave a comment saying mea culpa. This Latin acknowledgement of fault is itself a small act of reparation that brings comfort to Mary's heart. And stay with me, because understanding the third error may be the most important spiritual revelation you'll receive this May. The legitimacy of Padre Pio's insights about these errors comes not just from his reputation for holiness, but from the miraculous consequences that followed when people corrected them. Consider the case of the Bertucci family from Naples. In May 1962, Angela Bertucci made the long journey to San Giovanni Rotondo with her seriously ill daughter Lucia, who suffered from an undiagnosed wasting disease. Doctors had given the 10-year-old girl just months to live. During confession, Padre Pio asked Angela a surprising question that seemed unrelated to her daughter's condition. How do you honor the Mother of God in your home during May? Angela proudly described their elaborate May altar, daily rosaries, and special candles. Padre Pio listened carefully before saying, "You've committed the first two errors, but it's the third that has allowed illness into your home." He then revealed the third error that offends the Virgin Mary most deeply in May, separating devotion from action. May devotions that don't change how you treat others mock the Mother of God. Padre Pio explained, "You cannot honor Mary with your lips while dishonoring her with your actions toward her other children." He explained that May is not merely a month of increased prayers to Mary, but a time when our treatment of others should reflect Mary's own heart. The Bertucci family had maintained perfect May devotions while harboring a years-long bitter dispute with neighbors, refusing reconciliation despite multiple opportunities. Each Hail Mary prayed while willfully maintaining discord becomes another sword in her heart, Padre Pio said firmly. Your May altar is beautiful, but your unforgiveness has built a wall between your family and God's mercy. Angela wept as she recognized the truth. Under Padre Pio's direction, the family returned home and immediately sought reconciliation with their neighbors. They invited these former enemies to join them in their May devotions that very evening. 3 days later, Lucia's condition mysteriously began to improve. By month's end, doctors confirmed she had entered an unexpected remission. This pattern repeated itself throughout Padre Pio's ministry. Those who corrected this third error, making May a month of merciful actions rather than just devotional practices, reported profound spiritual and sometimes physical healings. Padre Pio provided a specific test to determine if you've fallen into this third error. Look at how you've treated difficult people this May. Has your devotion to Mary softened your heart toward them? If not, your May flowers and prayers remain incomplete. The urgency of correcting these errors cannot be overstated. In one of his last May sermons before his death, Padre Pio warned, "The next 2 aspects of Marian devotion will determine whether your prayers actually reach heaven or remain earthbound. What I'm about to reveal makes even experienced spiritual directors uncomfortable. If you've discovered you've been committing the third error, don't despair. In fact, recognizing it is the first step toward a profound spiritual transformation. Leave a comment saying misericordia, mercy, if you commit today to aligning your actions with your devotions for the remainder of May. The story of Marco Bellini illustrates the devastating cost of not understanding these errors that offend Our Lady during May. Marco was a prominent Catholic businessman from Milan, known for his extravagant May devotions. Each year, he sponsored the most elaborate May procession in his parish, donated expensive flower arrangements that adorned the church all month, and even had a small chapel dedicated to Our Lady in his company headquarters. Yet in 1965, when Marco traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo seeking Padre Pio's blessing for a new business venture, he received a shocking response. As soon as he entered the confessional, before he could speak, Padre Pio said firmly, "The Mother of God does not recognize you." Marco was stunned into silence. How could this be? His devotion to Mary was renowned throughout Milan. For 10 May seasons, Padre Pio continued, you have built thrones for Mary while leaving your workers without fair wages. You have crowned her with flowers while denying your employees time to care for their families. The contradiction has created such spiritual dissonance that your prayers during May actually compound your offense. This exchange reveals a critical truth. The errors that offend Mary during May can create a dangerous spiritual illusion, the appearance of devotion that masks a deepening separation from authentic faith. Marco had invested thousands in May devotions, while his business practices directly contradicted Catholic social teaching on just wages and working conditions. Padre Pio explained that May devotions are meant to transform us into more perfect reflections of Christ through Mary's example. When we separate devotional practices from living faith, we not only fail to grow spiritually, but actually harden our hearts against genuine conversion. The cost for Marco was severe. For years, he had experienced a growing sense of spiritual emptiness despite his religious practices. His family life had deteriorated as his wife and children saw the contradiction between his public piety and private behavior. Business decisions had become increasingly driven by profit rather than ethics, justified by his generous donations to the church. "Your May devotions have become a spiritual anesthetic," Padre Pio told him, "numbing you to the damage being done to your soul." But then Padre Pio revealed something remarkable. These errors could be corrected even after years of habitual practice. The path forward required 4 specific steps that he shared with Marco, steps we'll explore in detail shortly. Mary waits at the threshold between superficial devotion and authentic relationship, Padre Pio explained. She cannot force anyone across, but stands ready to guide all who genuinely seek her Son. Marco's story had a transformative ending. After implementing Padre Pio's guidance, he reorganized his business to prioritize just treatment of workers, even at significant personal financial cost. The following May, he sponsored no processions or elaborate decorations. Instead, he spent the month working alongside his employees, learning about their families and addressing long-ignored workplace issues. "I feel as though I've just met the Mother of God for the first time," he wrote to Padre Pio that June, after a decade of merely talking about her. Padre Pio revealed on his deathbed that the 4th aspect of proper May devotion was understood by only a handful of souls during his lifetime. "This element," he whispered to his fellow Capuchin brothers, "is what transforms May from a month of devotional practices into a spiritual revolution." What was this 4th element that even devout Catholics frequently missed? The answer connects directly to why Padre Pio considered May the most critical month for spiritual growth or regression. The 4th element of proper Marian devotion that Padre Pio revealed with great caution was something the saint called Mary's hidden pedagogy. This aspect of May devotions was so profound that Padre Pio claimed it was often misunderstood even by theologians and spiritual directors when he tried to explain it. May is not primarily about what we do for Mary, Padre Pio explained to his spiritual children, but about allowing Mary to form Christ within us, just as she physically formed him in her womb. This concept was controversial enough that Padre Pio was instructed by his superiors to discuss it only in private spiritual direction for many years. Why? Because it challenged the common approach to May devotions as primarily external practices, novenas, processions, special prayers, and reframed them as tools for interior transformation. In 1959, during a private meeting with a group of Franciscan seminarians, Padre Pio finally elaborated on this 4th element. One of those present, who later became a prominent spiritual director, recorded his words, "Each May, the Mother of God receives special permission from heaven to work more intensively in souls open to her influence. The Church recognizes this through dedicating the month to her, but few understand the spiritual mechanics involved." Padre Pio explained that Mary doesn't merely intercede more powerfully during May, she actively works to reshape the interior landscape of receptive souls through what he called spiritual motherhood in real time. This means that devotions during May, when properly understood, become portals through which Mary can actually shape our interior responses, inclinations, and spiritual senses. "The prayers and practices of May are like surgical instruments in Mary's hands," he said. "But if we focus only on the external performance of these devotions while resisting interior change, we transform her instruments into obstacles." This explains why some people can practice elaborate May devotions for years while experiencing little spiritual growth. According to Padre Pio, they have inadvertently blocked the very purpose of these devotions, Mary's interior formative work. Elena Bianchi, a spiritual daughter of Padre Pio for over 20 years, shared how this understanding transformed her experience of May devotions. For decades, she had faithfully maintained all the traditional practices, but felt spiritually stagnant. Under Padre Pio's direction, she began each May devotion with a specific prayer of permission. "Mother, I give you access to reshape my interior life as you formed your son. I surrender especially my reactions, my immediate thoughts, and my deep-seated attitudes. Within one May season, her family and friends noticed remarkable changes in her responses to difficulties. Where she had once been easily offended, she now showed immediate understanding. Long-standing resentments seemed to dissolve without effort. It wasn't that I was trying harder to be virtuous, Elena later wrote. It was as though someone had gone into the control room of my soul and recalibrated all the reactions. That someone was Mary. Padre Pio taught that May becomes truly transformative when we understand it as a month of intensified spiritual motherhood rather than just increased devotional practices. This requires a fundamental shift from doing things for Mary to allowing Mary to do something in us. The specific method Padre Pio taught for facilitating this interior work involved a daily examination unlike any other. Rather than focusing primarily on sins committed, he instructed his spiritual children to review each day's automatic reactions, identifying patterns that did not reflect Christ's heart. These reactions are precisely where Mary wishes to work during May, he explained. They reveal where Christ has not yet been fully formed in us. This approach to May devotion was so effective that Padre Pio claimed it could accomplish more interior transformation in 1 month than years of ordinary spiritual effort. However, he also warned that it required genuine openness to change, sometimes uncomfortable change. The fifth dimension of Marian devotion during May, Padre Pio once confided to a fellow priest, touches on territory most Catholics are entirely unprepared to explore. It involves Mary's role in spiritual warfare that most would rather not acknowledge. If you're committed to experiencing the transformative power of authentic May devotion, comment fiat, the word Mary herself used to express complete openness to God's action in her life. The fifth dimension of Marian devotion that Padre Pio revealed with great caution concerns Mary's unique role in spiritual warfare, a role that becomes especially potent during her dedicated month of May. This aspect of Marian devotion is rarely discussed in general spiritual literature, but was, according to Padre Pio, essential for understanding why proper May devotions carry such spiritual significance. In May, Padre Pio explained to a small circle of spiritual directees, the veil between Mary's protective action and our daily spiritual battles grows exceptionally thin. This is why errors in devotion during this month carry heightened consequences. Father Dominic Catanese, who assisted Padre Pio for many years, recalled the saint teaching that May represents a special operational period during which Mary receives expanded authority to intervene against spiritual attacks on her devoted children. However, this protection becomes fully activated only when our devotion avoids the 3 critical errors previously discussed. According to Padre Pio's teachings, Mary's warfare is not primarily external but interior, focused on the battlefield of our thoughts, emotional reactions, and habitual patterns. During May, she works to identify and neutralize what Padre Pio called enemy footholds, areas of our interior life that give adversarial spiritual forces influence over our peace, perceptions, and decisions. A dramatic illustration of this principle occurred in May 1962. A prominent psychiatrist, an atheist who had come to interview Padre Pio for a psychological study, was startled when the saint interrupted their conversation to say, "Your mind has been under systematic attack for 7 years. Specific thoughts that you believe are your own intellectual conclusions were tactically implanted to lead you away from faith." The psychiatrist was shaken to his core. He had indeed experienced a dramatic shift in his thinking about religion exactly 7 years earlier, but had attributed it to intellectual maturation. Padre Pio proceeded to describe, with disturbing accuracy, the exact sequence and nature of doubts that had led to the man's abandonment of faith. During May, Padre Pio told him, The Mother of God can trace these foreign implantations back to their source and extract them, but only with your permission and cooperation. The psychiatrist, Dr. Alessandro Verratti, later documented his experience, writing that following Padre Pio's specific May devotional protocol resulted in a systematic unraveling of intellectual objections I had considered irrefutable. They dissolved not through counter-argument, but through a strange interior illumination that revealed their artificial nature. Padre Pio taught that Mary's spiritual warfare intervention during May operates on 5 interconnected levels. First, she illuminates thoughts and reactions that are not authentically our own, but have been adopted through external negative influences. Second, she creates a protective interior environment where these foreign elements can be safely examined without triggering the defensive mechanisms that typically entrench them further. Third, in times of suffering or loss, they experience a distinctive form of consolation that Padre Pio called Mary's maternal nearness, a palpable sense of being accompanied that transcends emotional comfort. Giuseppe Laviati, a businessman who had been under Padre Pio's spiritual direction for over 20 years, shared how this promise manifested during the most devastating period of his life. After losing his wife and daughter in a car accident in 1965, Giuseppe fell into profound despair. Having faithfully practiced May devotions for years under Padre Pio's guidance, he reported experiencing what he could only describe as a presence that grieved with me, yet simultaneously sustained me. It wasn't that my pain was removed, Giuseppe later wrote, but rather that I was never alone within it. This presence was distinctly Marian. It carried her characteristics of strength within suffering, of hope maintained in darkness. This accords precisely with what Padre Pio described as the most precious fruit of May devotions, not immunity from life's sorrows, but a transformed experience of them through Mary's accompanying presence. Perhaps most intriguing is what Padre Pio called the mystery of the 6th location. Throughout his ministry, he had spoken of 5 specific spiritual locations where Mary's protection and presence could be established through proper devotion. These corresponded to 5 dimensions of the human person: the mind, the heart, the will, the body, and the soul. But in his final teachings, Padre Pio alluded to a mysterious 6th location that could not be directly taught, but would reveal itself to those who faithfully established Mary's presence in the first 5. This 6th place, he said with notable emotion, I cannot name or describe adequately. It exists beyond conceptual frameworks. But those who have experienced it recognize it immediately, and it becomes the most treasured spiritual geography of their inner life. While he never explicitly identified this 6th location, those closest to him understood it to represent what mystical tradition calls the ground of the soul, that deepest center where the human person and divine life meet in ineffable communion. When Mary's presence reaches this level, Padre Pio suggested, a kind of spiritual fusion occurs that permanently alters how that soul experiences relationship with God. Father Pellegrino, who was present during this final teaching, later commented, I had the distinct impression he was describing something he himself had experienced. A Marian transformation so profound it defied explanation, but radically reconfigured his entire spiritual experience. Indeed, in his very last documented words about May devotions, spoken just weeks before his death, Padre Pio made a statement that continues to inspire and challenge those who encounter it. When Mary fully establishes her presence in a soul through these devotions correctly practiced, that person becomes a living sanctuary, not merely housing divine life, but radiating it in a manner that affects the spiritual atmosphere around them. This suggests that the ultimate promise of proper May devotions extends beyond personal transformation to a kind of spiritual influence that impacts others, what some might call a redemptive presence in a troubled world. Throughout his life, Padre Pio demonstrated this profound devotion to Mary. He always carried a rosary with him and was often called the Living Rosary by his fellow friars due to his unwavering commitment to this prayer. In his personal devotions, Padre Pio considered the rosary a powerful spiritual weapon, once saying, "Love Our Lady and make others love her. Always say your rosary and say it well." Satan always tries to destroy this prayer, but he will never succeed. But there was something more. In his final days, Padre Pio revealed what he considered the most profound secret about May devotions, the mystery that completes the cycle of Marian transformation. The month of May, he whispered to those gathered at his bedside, is not merely a time when we honor Mary. It is a time when Mary herself is given special permission to form Christ within us. Just as she physically formed the body of Christ in her womb, she spiritually forms his presence in our souls during this sacred month. This revelation places May devotions in an entirely new light. They are not simply acts of honor toward the Mother of God, but openings through which she can actively shape our interior lives according to the pattern of her Son. Each prayer, each devotional practice, becomes not just an offering, but an invitation for Mary's formative touch. The greatest tragedy, Padre Pio concluded, is that so few understand what is being offered to them each May. They practice devotions without realizing they are actually participating in a mystery of spiritual formation as profound as the Incarnation itself. If there is one final encouragement Padre Pio would give us, it is this: never approach May devotions as mere religious customs or pious practices. Approach them as sacred opportunities for Mary to form Christ within you, to shape your thoughts, reactions, perceptions, and deepest identity until they mirror her Son's. When you understand this, he promised, everything changes. May becomes not just a month of devotion, but a laboratory of spiritual transformation. And the fruits of this transformation will remain with you throughout eternity. If this teaching has touched your heart and you intend to approach this May with renewed understanding, comment renewal as your commitment to honor Mary in the way Padre Pio teaches truly pleases her heart. And remember his parting promise: those who honor Mary correctly during May become themselves living gifts to the heart of Christ, and no offering could please him more than seeing his mother truly loved and understood. She gradually restores our spiritual immune system, our ability to recognize and reject thoughts contrary to faith, hope, and charity. Fourth, she systematically replaces distorted interior narratives with perspectives aligned with truth. Fifth, she establishes new neural and spiritual pathways that bypass our habitual negative responses. This process, which Padre Pio called Marian interior liberation, becomes intensified during May for those who approach Marian devotion correctly. He provided specific guidelines for cooperating with this liberation process. Each day of May, spend 5 minutes in complete silence, simply asking Mary to reveal one thought pattern that is not authentically your own, but has been accepted from negative sources. When such a pattern is identified, do not resist or fight it directly. Instead, imagine placing it in Mary's hands and watch what she does with it. Throughout the day, when you catch yourself falling into identified negative patterns, immediately invoke Mary's presence specifically for interior warfare assistance, not just general help. Before sleep, review instances where you noticed greater freedom from identified patterns, specifically thanking Mary for her interior liberation work. When these practices are faithfully followed throughout May, Padre Pio promised, many experience more spiritual liberation in 31 days than in years of struggle through willpower alone. Dr. Verratti's case was not isolated. Padre Pio's spiritual records contain dozens of documented cases where individuals experiencing severe, long-term spiritual oppression found remarkable liberation through correctly practiced May devotions. But there remains a sixth element: Padre Pio confided to his closest associates, one that connects individual liberation to cosmic spiritual battle. This aspect of May devotion carries implications few are prepared to consider. If you've recognized areas where your thoughts and reactions may not be fully your own, comment Libera Me to signal your desire for Mary's liberation work this May. The transformative power of correctly practiced May devotions becomes evident through countless testimonies from those under Padre Pio's spiritual direction. One particularly striking case involved Sophia Morelli, a woman who had struggled with debilitating scrupulosity for nearly 2 decades. Scrupulosity, an obsessive concern with one's own sins and perceived moral failings, had turned Sophia's spiritual life into a torment. Despite regular confessions, constant prayers, and multiple pilgrimages seeking healing, her condition had steadily worsened. By the time she reached San Giovanni Rotondo in April 1960, she was confessing multiple times daily and unable to receive communion without overwhelming anxiety. When Padre Pio heard her confession, he did something unexpected. Rather than addressing her perceived sins, he said simply, "Your May devotion needs correction." He then prescribed what appeared to be an overly simplistic practice. Each day of May, she was to spend exactly 7 minutes contemplating a different quality of Mary's relationship with Jesus, focusing particularly on their communication style. Study how Mary spoke to Jesus, how she listened, how they understood each other without words, Padre Pio instructed. Then permit that same relational pattern to establish itself between your soul and God. No elaborate prayers. No complex devotions, just 7 minutes daily observing and absorbing the communication patterns between mother and son. Sophia later reported that for the first week, she felt she was wasting time. By the second week, however, she noticed subtle shifts in her prayer experience, moments of unexpected peace, brief periods where the compulsive need to confess subsided. By the third week, something extraordinary began happening. Her interior dialogue was changing. The harsh, condemning voice that had tormented her for years was gradually being replaced by something quieter, gentler, more patient. "I realized that what Padre Pio had prescribed wasn't just a devotion," she later wrote. "It was communication therapy for my soul. Mary was actually restructuring how I heard and interpreted God's voice." By June, Sophia's scrupulosity had diminished so dramatically that her parish priest, who had witnessed her suffering for years, asked her to document the transformation process. The change, as Padre Pio had promised, had begun manifesting within the first 48 hours, subtly at first, then with increasing momentum throughout the month. This case illustrates what Padre Pio considered the most misunderstood aspect of May devotions. They are not primarily about doing things for Mary, but about entering a transformative communion with her that restructures our interior spiritual communication systems. May is when Mary most actively teaches souls how to hear God correctly, Padre Pio explained. Most spiritual suffering comes from misinterpreting God's voice or mistaking other voices for His. Mary corrects this distortion when we enter proper communion with her. Padre Pio provided specific guidance on what to expect during the first 48 hours of corrected May devotion. First, you may notice subtle changes in sleep patterns, often deeper rest or meaningful dreams. Second, certain habitual thoughts may suddenly feel foreign, as though they no longer fit your interior landscape. Third, you may experience unexpected emotional responses to familiar situations, finding peace where anxiety once dominated or compassion where judgment was automatic. Fourth, scripture passages or prayers that never particularly moved you might suddenly speak with new significance. Fifth, you may become aware of interior movements you never noticed before, the subtle promptings of grace that were previously drowned out by louder interior voices. These initial changes, according to Padre Pio, are signs that Mary has begun the work of recalibrating your interior spiritual faculties. They represent the beginning of what he called restoration of authentic spiritual perception. For those experiencing these changes, Padre Pio advised neither excessive analysis nor passive disregard, but simple acknowledgement and gratitude. These are not the main transformation, he explained, but rather the preparatory adjustments making deeper work possible. The deeper transformation, which typically unfolds throughout the entire month of May, involves a fundamental shift in how we experience relationship with God, moving from performance-based interaction to genuine communion. But there remains a critical element missing, Padre Pio often noted toward the end of his life. Without the activating ritual Mary herself taught, these devotions, even when practiced correctly, achieve only a fraction of their intended effect. If you've begun experiencing any of these subtle shifts in your interior life, comment "transformation" as a testimony to Mary's work beginning in you. The activating ritual that completes and amplifies correct May devotions was something Padre Pio discussed with great reverence. According to his teaching, this ritual wasn't invented by the Church, but was taught by Mary herself through private revelations to several saints throughout history, including Saint Catherine Labouré and Saint Maximilian Kolbe, before being confirmed in Padre Pio's own mystical experiences. Without this activating component, Padre Pio explained to a group of spiritual directees in May 1965, our May devotions are like beautifully constructed instruments that no one plays. They have form, but lack power. The ritual itself is deceptively simple, yet profoundly effective when performed with proper understanding and intention. Padre Pio taught that it should be performed twice during May, once at the beginning of the month and once at the end, creating a spiritual container for all other May devotions. The essence of this ritual involves three synchronized elements. First, a specific prayer of consecration to Mary that Padre Pio composed, which acknowledges her threefold role as mother, mediatrix, and co-redemptrix. Second, a physical action that symbolizes the interior surrender being made. Third, precise timing that aligns with cosmic spiritual currents particularly strong during May. Francesco Forgione, Padre Pio's grandnephew who spent many May seasons under his great-uncle's spiritual direction, described the ritual's impact. When I first performed it as Uncle Pio instructed, I felt something shift in my spiritual atmosphere, like a door had opened between worlds. Devotions that had previously felt like obligations suddenly came alive with presence. The ritual begins with preparation the evening before. Padre Pio advised selecting a small religious object, ideally a rosary or medal, but even a simple cross would suffice, that would become what he called a conductor of Marian grace throughout the month. This object should be placed on a white cloth overnight in a quiet location. The next morning, ideally between 5 and 6 a.m., though Padre Pio emphasized the intention was more important than exact timing, the ritual proper begins with the reading of the Magnificat, Luke 1:46-55, followed by 3 minutes of complete silence while holding the chosen object. Then comes the consecration prayer Padre Pio composed, which translates roughly as, "Mother of my Lord, I recognize your threefold claim upon my life. As the one who formed Christ, you know how souls are shaped. As the one who stood beneath the cross, you understand suffering's transformative power. As the one crowned in heaven, you have authority in spiritual realms. I place myself within this threefold protection and influence throughout this month dedicated to you. Reconfigure my interior responses according to the pattern of your Son. Where I resist through fear or habit, gently persist. Where I open through trust, swiftly establish new foundations. Let this month become a workshop where you labor unhindered in the depths of my being." Following this prayer, the physical action involves pressing the consecrated object to your forehead, lips, and heart, symbolizing the surrender of thoughts, words, and desires to Mary's formative influence. The ritual concludes with a simple promise to perform some concrete act of charity that day in Mary's honor, a practice that, according to Padre Pio, grounds spiritual consecration in practical reality. When repeated at month's end, May 31st, the same ritual takes on a sealing function, stabilizing the interior work accomplished throughout the month. Padre Pio was adamant that this ritual not be performed superstitiously. It is not magic, he would emphasize. Its power comes not from precise formulations, but from aligning our intentions with Mary's divine mandate as spiritual mother. He specifically warned against two extremes: dismissing the ritual as unnecessarily formal or attributing automatic effects to its external performance without interior surrender. When the ritual is performed with genuine understanding, he explained, it creates optimal conditions for Mary's formative work throughout May. Without it, devotions may still bear fruit, but significantly less than their full potential. Those under Padre Pio's direction who faithfully performed this ritual often reported that their May devotions took on a distinctive quality compared to previous years. Less effort, greater depth, and more lasting effects that extended well beyond the month itself. But there is a final warning Padre Pio felt compelled to share. His longtime assistant, Father Pellegrino Funicelli, revealed years after the saint's death. It concerns spiritual opposition that inevitably arises when this ritual activates Mary's intensified work in a soul. If you intend to perform this activating ritual this May, comment consecro as a public declaration of your intention. During the last May of his earthly life in 1968, Padre Pio gathered his closest spiritual children to deliver what many consider his most sobering warning about Marian devotion. His health had deteriorated significantly, and those present noted how he seemed to speak with particular urgency, as though conveying information of critical importance before his departure. What I must tell you about May, devotions carries both promise and caution, he began. The promise is this: Mary's action during her dedicated month can accomplish spiritual renewal beyond what years of ordinary effort might achieve. The caution is equally true. When this renewal begins, opposition inevitably follows. Padre Pio explained that proper May devotions, especially when activated through the ritual he taught, initiate what he called accelerated interior alignment. This process begins dismantling obstacles to grace that have been established sometimes over decades of habitual patterns. Such dismantling rarely occurs without resistance, both from within ourselves and from spiritual forces opposed to our sanctification. When Mary begins her work in earnest, Padre Pio warned, expect 3 specific forms of opposition to manifest within the first 2 weeks of May. Recognizing these for what they are determines whether your devotion will deepen or be abandoned. The first form of opposition typically appears as sudden, unexplainable fatigue or dryness, specifically during prayer times. Many, interpreting this as lack of spiritual progress, ironically abandon the very devotions beginning to produce effect. Padre Pio called this the drowsiness tactic, and noted it often targets those whose primary spiritual strength lies in emotional fervor. The second opposition manifests as unusual intensification of external responsibilities precisely when you've committed to May devotions. Unexpected work demands, family complications, or logistical challenges create what appears to be practical justification for setting aside spiritual commitments. Padre Pio called this the urgency illusion and observed it frequently succeeded against those who placed high value on productivity and responsibility. The third and most subtle form of opposition comes through intellectual skepticism that suddenly questions the value or theology of Marian devotion. Thoughts like, "This is excessive attention to Mary," or "I should focus directly on Christ instead," arise with convincing force. Padre Pio called this the sophistication strategy and noted it was particularly effective against the intellectually inclined. Lucia Bellarmino, present during this final teaching, later recalled Padre Pio saying, "Note carefully that these oppositions arise not before you begin May devotions, but specifically after they've started producing effect. Their timing reveals their reactive nature." The saint provided specific guidance for countering each form of opposition. For sudden spiritual fatigue, he advised physically changing position during prayer, standing instead of kneeling, walking instead of sitting, and deliberately shortening prayer duration while increasing frequency. Better 5 minutes 6 times daily than half an hour abandoned after 3 days, he counseled. For the intensification of external pressures, he recommended implementing what he called sanctuary minutes, 60-second pauses integrated throughout even the busiest days, during which attention returns fully to Mary's presence. These miniature devotions can maintain continuity when longer periods become temporarily impossible, he explained. For intellectual doubts about Marian devotion, Padre Pio suggested a disarmingly simple response. Say directly to Mary, "I'm experiencing doubt about whether this attention to you is appropriate. If these doubts are not from you, help me see their source." He promised that sincere questioning directed to Mary herself would receive clear illumination. What makes this final teaching particularly striking is Padre Pio's assertion that the intensity of opposition encountered during May devotions actually indicates their effectiveness. "Opposition proportionate to potential," he stated. "The depth of resistance signals the significance of what Mary has begun." Father Alessio Parente, who assisted Padre Pio during his final years, documented the saint saying, "In these turbulent times approaching the 3rd millennium, proper May devotion becomes increasingly crucial. The Mother of God has been assigned special protective authority for this historical period, but its activation requires human cooperation through correctly understood devotion." Padre Pio emphasized that May 2000 would mark the beginning of a period when Mary's protective action would become essential for maintaining spiritual equilibrium in a world experiencing accelerating instability. We now find ourselves well into this period, he foresaw. Those who understand and implement what I have shared about May devotions, Padre Pio promised, will experience a distinctive protection amidst increasing spiritual confusion. This protection extends beyond individual souls to families and communities connected to them. If you've recognized any of these forms of opposition in your own experience of May devotions, comment "perseverance" as a commitment to continue despite resistance. The eternal promise of properly observed May devotions manifests in 3 specific ways throughout the remainder of one's spiritual journey. First, in moments of critical spiritual decision, those who have properly observed May devotions experience what Padre Pio called Marian clarity, an unexpected illumination that cuts through confusion precisely when direction is most needed. Second, during periods of intense spiritual attack or temptation, these souls find access to what he described as reserves of resistance that seem to come not from their own strength, but from an established wellspring. Third, in times of suffering or loss, they experience a distinctive form of consolation that Padre Pio called Mary's maternal nearness, a palpable sense of being accompanied that transcends emotional comfort. Giuseppe Laviati, a businessman who had been under Padre Pio's spiritual direction for over 20 years, shared how this promise manifested during the most devastating period of his life. After losing his wife and daughter in a car accident in 1965, Giuseppe fell into profound despair. Having faithfully practiced May devotions for years under Padre Pio's guidance, he reported experiencing what he could only describe as a presence that grieved with me, yet simultaneously sustained me. It wasn't that my pain was removed, Giuseppe later wrote, but rather that I was never alone within it. This presence was distinctly Marian. It carried her characteristics of strength within suffering, of hope maintained in darkness. This accords precisely with what Padre Pio described as the most precious fruit of May devotions, not immunity from life's sorrows, but a transformed experience of them through Mary's accompanying presence. Perhaps most intriguing is what Padre Pio called the mystery of the sixth location. Throughout his ministry, he had spoken of 5 specific spiritual locations where Mary's protection and presence could be established through proper devotion. These corresponded to 5 dimensions of the human person: the mind, the heart, the will, the body, and the soul. But in his final teachings, Padre Pio alluded to a mysterious 6th location that could not be directly taught, but would reveal itself to those who faithfully established Mary's presence in the first 5. This 6th place, he said with notable emotion, I cannot name or describe adequately. It exists beyond conceptual frameworks. But those who have experienced it recognize it immediately, and it becomes the most treasured spiritual geography of their inner life. While he never explicitly identified this 6th location, those closest to him understood it to represent what mystical tradition calls the ground of the soul, that deepest center where the human person and divine life meet in ineffable communion. When Mary's presence reaches this level, Padre Pio suggested, a kind of spiritual fusion occurs that permanently alters how that soul experiences relationship with God. Father Pellegrino, who was present during this final teaching, later commented, I had the distinct impression he was describing something he himself had experienced, a Marian transformation so profound it defied explanation, but radically reconfigured his entire spiritual experience. Throughout his life, Padre Pio demonstrated this profound devotion to Mary. He always carried a rosary with him and was often called the living rosary by his fellow friars due to his unwavering commitment to this prayer. In his personal devotions, Padre Pio considered the rosary a powerful spiritual weapon, once saying, "Love Our Lady and make others love her. Always say your rosary and say it well. Satan always tries to destroy this prayer, but he will never succeed." But there was something more. In his final days, Padre Pio revealed what he considered the most profound secret about May devotions, the mystery that completes the cycle of Marian transformation. The month of May, he whispered to those gathered at his bedside, is not merely a time when we honor Mary. It is a time when Mary herself is given special permission to form Christ within us. Just as she physically formed the body of Christ in her womb, she spiritually forms his presence in our souls during this sacred month. This revelation places May devotions in an entirely new light. They are not simply acts of honor toward the Mother of God, but openings through which she can actively shape our interior lives according to the pattern of her Son. Each prayer, each devotional practice becomes not just an offering, but an invitation for Mary's formative touch. The greatest tragedy, Padre Pio concluded, is that so few understand what is being offered to them each May. They practice devotions without realizing they are actually participating in a mystery of spiritual formation as profound as the Incarnation itself. If there is one final encouragement Padre Pio would give us, it is this: never approach May devotions as mere religious customs or pious practices. Approach them as sacred opportunities for Mary to form Christ within you, to shape your thoughts, reactions, perceptions, and deepest identity until they mirror her Son's. When you understand this, he promised, everything changes. May becomes not just a month of devotion, but a laboratory of spiritual transformation. And the fruits of this transformation will remain with you throughout eternity. Indeed, if this teaching has touched your heart and you intend to approach this May with renewed understanding, comment renewal, as your commitment to honor Mary in the way Padre Pio teaches truly pleases her heart. And remember his parting promise: those who honor Mary correctly during May become themselves living gifts to the heart of Christ, and no offering could please him more than seeing his mother truly loved and understood.